It's Thursday the 17th of June 2021. Welcome to my video. We're still in partial lockdown, waiting to see what happens next. Right, today I'm going to first talk about and then demonstrate a DART procedure. That's D-A-R-T. They're named after Professor Raymond Dart. He was born in Brisbane in 1893 or thereabouts. Most people that have heard of him these days have heard of him because of the work that he did in the examination of the skeletal remains of very early humans. He spent most of his working life out in the Great Rift Valley in Africa investigating the skeletal remains. But the reason that I'm interested in him is because of what we now call DART procedures. Dart seems to be one of those interesting individuals who seemed to become an instant world expert, whatever he turned his attention to, brain the size of a planet, that sort of thing. He had a child who was born prematurely and starved of oxygen at birth. So he applied his knowledge of evolution and human development to come up with a series of movement patterns to take this child through every day for quite a long time. And indeed the child did develop much more fully than those around him had anticipated. In 1920 or thereabouts, Dart had a series of Alexander lessons with a woman called Irene Tasker in Johannesburg. And he realised that what was happening to him through these Alexander lessons was very similar to what he was trying to bring about in his child through what we now call DART procedures. So he wrote to Alexander, who was in London by this time, and there then ensued literally decades of enthusiastic correspondence between them. They only ever met once. I think it was 1946 when Dart came to London for a conference, and while he was there he had one lesson with Alexander, and apparently they got on like a house on fire. So it's a little bit of an historical quirk really that there is this link between DART procedures and Alexander technique. It can certainly be argued that there are other things that are equally similar to the Alexander technique, which we as a body of Alexander teachers don't tend to sort of pay much attention to, although obviously some individual teachers investigate all sorts of interesting things. But because of this historical link, DART procedures are traditionally taught to a very minor degree on most, not all, but most Alexander teacher training courses. So mine was fairly typical. In 3 years of training, I think we did 2 days of DART procedures. I loved them. There was something about them. I couldn't explain what it was, but there was something about them which I really liked. They just felt really holistic, and yeah, things just seemed to flow very nicely. I can't be more specific than that. So I started practicing some of them, and then to be honest, I forgot all about them. There was so much else going on with the Alexander training that I forgot all about them. Until about 6 months after I qualified as a teacher, when I went down to London for a weekend workshop on DART procedures for Alexander teachers, where I was reintroduced to them, and since then I've been both practicing them and teaching them rather enthusiastically. Some of them are quite complicated, some of them are more simple, some of them are quite uncomfortable, especially when you're not used to them. Some are a lot more comfortable. Now, Dart didn't actually name any of his procedures. Indeed, in the way that we teach them, or I teach them, he didn't even sort of invent them in this way. They were kind of drawn into a teachable couple called Alex and Ruth Murray. Now, I was, as I say, very enthusiastic about them, but it was impossible for a while, or at least impossible for me, to find out much about the background. And then I think it was 1996, a book was published which gathered some of his writings together. The book was called Skill and Poise by Professor Raymond Dart. And I went out and bought a copy the day it came out at some expense, and opened the book and started to read, and my heart sank. It was full of these 12-syllable words way beyond what I could possibly properly understand. But it was quite a short book, and there were lots of diagrams. It cost me a lot of money, so I did manage to read it from cover to cover. And what I'm left with is an idea that works for me about where they're coming from. Now, this might or might not be true, but this works for me. As far as I understand it, Dart saw evolution as a series of distinct steps, and each step rests on top of what went before it. And he also saw adult human as at the pinnacle of all these steps. If any of these steps aren't resting very securely on what went before, then everything above that will be kind of shaking around, and that creature will never acquire what should be its birthright of skill and poise and balance. Now, obviously, we can't literally go back to being single-celled creatures floating around in a primal swamp, but there are certain movement patterns that we can go through which emulate some of these evolutionary stages. And through repeating these Dart procedures over and over again, we can smooth out and tighten up any of these sort of shaky links so that we start to acquire gradually more and more skill and poise and balance, which, I don't know about you, that might sound kind of unlikely. All I can say is it kind of works. That's the way they kind of work. If you start to do any of these procedures, not 100 times a day, but once or twice a day, but every day, you might notice nothing at first. But if you stick with it, not for months and months, but for a few weeks, you will probably start to just feel more at home in your body, more skilled, more poised, more balanced. So, the one we're going to do today is quite a comfortable one, you'll probably be pleased to know. And none of them got any names, so I've just given them names for myself so I know what I'm talking about. And this one I call Lost Dart, because I was taught it, loved it, practiced it for a while, then forgot all about it for about 6 months until I re-remembered it and started again. So I suppose it should be called Found Dart really, but anyway, Lost Dart is how it is. So I'm going to rearrange the room a little bit now, and then I'm going to take you through the practice. Now, a demonstration of the practice of Lost Dart procedure. So you can either do this as an exercise in itself, or if you've done your semi-supine lying down, you can do it as an alternative way of getting back up again. So let's pretend I've been lying here for 10, 15, 20 minutes. I've gone through all my directions very thoroughly, and it's now time for me to get up. So the first thing I do, I'll leave my upper arms alone, take my lower arms up and out and down, so I land palm up on the floor beside me with my arms pretty well straight. If you're not thinking about it, you'll probably end up with a bit of a W shape. But that's not what we want. So it's up and out like that, so your arms are pretty well straight. Still looking at the ceiling, you slide your arms up until they're pretty well pointing straight out from your sides. And then without moving your head, just with your eyes, you look towards your right hand. Then you roll your head to look at your hand. Now when you're new to this, you might find your head's kind of rolling off the book. You might be able to see that I've got a wider book than usual, so that's not going to be a problem. But if your head does start to roll off the book, rather than try and put up with it, just push the book out of the way and continue. So it's eyes leading, followed by the head rolling over to the side to look at the right hand. And then, leaving the back of your hand in contact with the floor, you slide your hand round like that. So you're swiveling the wrist so that you're looking along the back edge of the thumb. Keep looking along the back edge of the thumb. Keep your arm straight. And nice and slowly take your arm up and across and down. You'll need to let your knees just drop over to that side in order to accomplish this comfortably. So you want to end up with your hand either on top of your other hand or just beside it. Pause there, and then still looking along the back edge of your thumb, nice and slowly take your arm back to where it just came from. If you find yourself hurrying, give it up. There's absolutely no point in trying to get to the end. The benefits come from being in the process, not to getting to the end of it. Hand back where it came from, pause, just with your eyes look towards the ceiling, then roll your head to look at the ceiling. Don't move your head, just with your eyes look towards your left hand, then roll your head to look at your left hand. Swivel at the wrist to look along the back edge of the thumb. Keep your arm straight. Keep looking along the back edge of the thumb. Nice and slowly take your arm back and across and down to land on top of or just beside your other hand. Keep your arm straight. Keep looking along the back edge of the thumb. Nice and slowly take your arm back to where it just came from. Now it's quite important with these dart procedures that you don't roll one movement into the next. So I know that in a moment I'm going to look towards the ceiling with my eyes and I'm going to follow that with my head, but I don't roll the two together. So it's eyes, pause, head, pause. It doesn't matter if it's a quarter of a second pause or a 20-second pause, but don't roll the movements into one another. Just with your eyes look towards your right hand, roll your head to look at your right hand. Keep the back of your hand on the floor, swivel at the wrist to look along the back edge of the thumb, keep your arm straight. Keep looking along the back edge of the thumb. Take your arm up and across and down. So it's important, if you are planning to do a dart procedure at the end of your lying down, you select a place where you can put your arms out straight on either side without banging into the walls and the furniture. Keep your arms straight. Keep looking along the back edge of the thumb, nice and slowly, up and across and down. So when you're doing it for yourself, don't go any quicker than this. I'm going a little bit faster than I normally would, just because it's not the most gripping visual experience. Just with your eyes look towards the ceiling, roll your head to look at the ceiling. Just with your eyes look towards your left hand, roll your head to look at your left hand. Swivel at the wrist to look along the back edge of the thumb, keep your arm straight, keep looking along the back edge of the thumb. Up and across and down. So sometimes when I'm doing this, I enjoy it right from the beginning, but sometimes my mind's really wanting to go a lot quicker and it gets a bit bored with only doing one thing at a time and quite slowly. But if I can just go through that, then after a minute or two my mind starts going, oh, one thing at a time, this is actually rather nice, I'll go with this. Just with your eyes look towards the ceiling, roll your head to look at the ceiling. So I normally do 2 repetitions on each side, sometimes 3, and then the final time I start in the same way as usual, so it's eyes, head, swivel at the wrist, start to bring my arm up and across, but then when it feels right, I can't put it any more accurately than that, I just follow the movement through to roll over and onto all fours and get up from there. So I hope I didn't leave anything out there, just a little bit complicated. Another thing to say is that these dart procedures go much, much deeper than you might imagine. This wrist swivel, for instance, is common not to all dart procedures, but it's common to a lot of them. And apparently that movement keys straight to a very ancient part of the brain, which hasn't really changed for 600 million years. It's the flipper movement. So they do go deeper than you might imagine. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy your lost dart procedures. Thank you.